All right. So tonight, I'm excited to say that we are on the sixth part of the Noble Eightfold Path, which actually seventh part, which is wise mindfulness. So at this particular point, everything that we've done at this has been to stabilize the mind. All about stabilizing the mind. And so these last three aspects of the Noble Eightfold Path are about developing concentration. And like I said in the guided meditation, well, how come we want to develop concentration? We want to develop concentration because so we can develop insight into different parts of how the mind works. I mentioned two of them during the guided meditation. One being this thing called nama rupa, how the mind is affected by form, basically your sensory information. And then the second one that I mentioned is what's called purification of view, which is understanding what is impermanence, what is selflessness, and what is reactivity. I'm using different words. Some of you used to suffering, suffering and impermanence and not self. I'm using different words these days. I like these words better. The other parts of the path, are we begin with wisdom and we finish with wisdom, and wisdom is happening all during the path, as is virtue. So the Pali words for this are wisdom is panya, and virtue is called shila, and then and the concentration is called samadhi. And so shila, samadhi, and panya. All right, and so last time we talked about effort. So I got some good news for you, maybe some bad news for some of you. Okay, and the good news is that we just finished effort, and this practice can truly be effortless. It can come to the point where it's effortless. The reason that we think we have to put so much effort into this is because people like me have told you that, okay? As is my Dharma teachers have told me this, and there's truth to it. We'd have to put some effort into it. But really, when it comes down to it, the effort is more about just observing what's happening in the mind. That's all there is to it. It's very simple instructions. The instructions are not difficult here. It's just what's happening in the mind. Now, as you have probably discerned, not everything that happens in the mind is necessarily like so pleasant, right? And sometimes we're sitting there on the cushion, or we're in traffic, or with family members, and we're sitting there observing. It's Thanksgiving, observing. Granddad's cut the chicken right, everybody's having a good time, right? And then somebody drops something on the floor, and there's this thing called reactivity that occurs, right? Right? It says reactivity occurs. This is my new buzzword for suffering, reactivity. And so this process is the same. The process hasn't really changed. It's just observe. But the problem is with the reactivity, though, a lot of things get set in motion. All right, like thoughts, emotions, hindrances, all kinds of things that happen in the mind. But the process is still the same. The process is still about observing what is there, okay? And basically, when it comes down to it, letting go of the sense of separation from granddad or my little niece who dropped that thing on the floor, right? Noticing that and coming back to this sense that I am connected with whatever happens. Whatever happens, I am connected to it. I mean, it seemed like that because my sense of self says, I didn't want her to drop that on the floor. I can't believe she did that. How uncoordinated, right? And so, no, really, the truth is that we're connected to everything, but we create a self that says we're not. So the effort is to observe. The effort is also to, when we get reactive and we see this sense of self forming, how can we come back to the sense of connectivity? So it's connectivity, it's disconnect. It's connectivity, it's disconnect. It's connectivity, it's disconnect. All day long, connectivity, disconnect, okay? So effort is about just observing, just observing, being connected, right? And observing when I start to become disconnected and watching that process, right? And bringing myself back to now, just observing what's happened now. You'll notice that when something happens in the moment, most consistently, the disconnection is about the past or the future. It's never about really what's happening then. You know, she's dropped that thing on the floor like 2 minutes ago, but we're still somewhere else. The pain is still there because I'm reacting. And the sense of self is saying, I can't believe that happened. How could she do that? What is it about my niece, right? All this kind of narrative kind of thing that's happening. So that's effort. And then, just like we'll talk about in a few minutes, actually the effort becomes effortless because we're just training ourselves. We're training ourselves to whatever's happening now, very, very pleasant, very, very unpleasant, we're sticking with it. Whatever's happening, we're sticking with it. So that's why this is called training. And then 2 weeks ago, I said, oh, you should sit longer periods. You should sit extra 5 minutes, you know, and retreats are good. And yeah, and that is good because what that does is it teaches you to sit with difficult conditions. That's why that stuff is good. But that in itself seems like an effort at the start. And there is some effort. It's horizontal effort or mundane effort, like the effort of the world. The effort we're talking about is the effort about joining the now. The effort that we're talking about is being with what is. That's effortless. After a while, it gets to be simple. And really, probably some of you may be hearing this when it comes down to it, it's really mindfulness, isn't it? It's continuity of mindfulness, isn't it? When you hear this. Some of y'all picking up on that? This is continuity of mindfulness? Yeah. So, you know, when you hear about wise effort, you know, you hear this about, you know, like, you know, joining what is wholesome or helpful, right? And then, you know, pushing away, not pushing away, but letting go of what's unwholesome, right? You hear this. But really, you know, mindfulness itself and investigation itself, when unpleasant phenomena occur, okay, when they occur, we have the ability to join that. And that's wholesome. That's like in the loving kindness class, we talk about befriending. We use this word befriending, right? Y'all have been in this class, right? Befriending whatever experience is there, right? Which is difficult. I mean, it's not easy to do this, okay? But you're training yourself. This is training. You don't, you know, how long does it take to ride a bike, or how long does it take to learn karate, or how long does it take to play an instrument, right? All these take years. People practice this. People practice this for years too, because it's just instructions are very, very simple, but we got to keep on sticking with it. Determination, all right? Patience and determination. So, I mean, if we're talking about wise mindfulness, when we hear that, basically we're referring back to the Satipatthana. And if you're not familiar with Satipatthana, Satipatthana is called the 4 abidings of mindfulness. Anybody know them? Test question for the night. What's your test question for the night? Mindfulness of what? Mindfulness of what? Mindfulness of what? Mindfulness of what?
Mind is one of them.
Mind's one? Feelings one? Body's one? Close? Close? Okay. So mindfulness of the body is one. Okay. That's the physicality of the body. Feelings refer to the particular...
Perception.
Close. That's one of them. But that's not one of the 4, okay? That's part of it, okay? So feelings is what we call tone, either very, very unpleasant, very, very pleasant, or somewhere in between. That could be sensations, it could be emotions, it could be the mind, but basically we're talking about sensations when we're talking about this. And then there's the mind. What's the mind like at any particular time? There you go, nice. Mindfulness of Dharma. Yay, Gail. So mindfulness Dhamma is mental processes or mental objects. Okay, so there's 4 foundations. So when we talk about wise mindfulness, we're talking about Satipatthana. Each section has an introduction to it, and every type of meditation instruction has what's called a reframe. And in every reframe, the Buddha's given the same instructions. I think this is really important that he repeated this stuff over and over again. You know, I mean, he didn't do it just because it was cool. He did it because the instructions are very powerful. But in front of every section, body, feelings, mind, Dhamma, he's basically saying, you know, observe the body, that there is a body. When you're observing the body, that there is a body. Right now, you're in your body. Can you just know that you're in your body, right? You all know this right now, right?
Isn't it where he says the body in the body?
Yes, absolutely. The body in the body, right? Right. So, I'm going to ask Ben to read a reframe, and this is the reframe, and he'll repeat like the body, feelings, mind, Dhammas, because like I said, after every section, there's the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Are you ready? In this way, in regard to the body, feelings, mind, Dhammas, one abides contemplating the body, feelings, mind, Dhammas internally, or one abides contemplating each externally, or one abides contemplating each both internally and externally. One abides contemplating the nature of arising in the body, feelings, mind, Dhammas, the nature of passing away in the body, feelings, mind, and Dhammas, or the nature of both arising and passing away in the body, feelings, mind, and Dhammas. Mindfulness that there is a body, feelings, mind, and Dhammas is established in one to the extent necessary for bare knowledge and continuous mindfulness. And one abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That is how, in regard to the body, feelings, mind, Dhammas, one abides, contemplating each.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Pleasant. Okay. So what do you make of that sutta? I mean, anything in there resonate with you? Work for you?
It's sort of like the parts make up the whole. You know, we've got those phrases, the whole is worth more than the parts, and sort of contemplate the body and the feelings and the mind and the Dhammas is a simple instruction, but a big task.
Well, let me comment on that. So, like in this sutta, right? And I think I'm gonna ask David to help me with this, but every part of it is a different meditation. So the body itself, if we're talking about the body, you know, there's mindfulness of breathing, right? I mean, that's one of the bodies, but there's also mindfulness of posture. There's mindfulness of proprioception, how the body is arranged. There's mindfulness of the different parts of the body, and there's mindfulness of decaying corpses. And I think, and mindfulness of elements. I think that's in there too. All of those are meditations. All of those are meditations. There's several different ways to meditate. And that's what I was trying to convey in the guided meditation. I would highly suggest to you that you pick one thing. Like most people probably in here, when you do a mindfulness of breathing, you're attending to touch. I said that. You're attending to touch. That is a sense portal. That is a Dhamma. That's later on in section 4. You're attending to the body, but you're essentially attending to touch. It's a body meditation, but we're attending to touch, how the mind is affected by sensations. Okay. The next one, mindfulness of feelings, is you can be aware of feelings in different places, sensations. Mind, you can be aware of feeling tone there, different aspects of how the mind is. Is it flexible, inflexible? Is there hate, or is there greed, or is it neutral? And then, of course, all these different dhammas, which are senses. Those are, and we all know this one. We practice mindfulness of sound here. We practice sound, right? We practice that. There's also mindfulness of the aggregates. Includes feeling tone, includes perception, includes mental formations, and then there's mindfulness of the awakening factors. Okay, and the Four Noble Truths. Now, with this though, I try to get it at the end, and we've done it in here before. You may consider taking one aspect of that, like let's suppose it's sound, right? And just allowing yourself to be mindful of whatever sound enters consciousness. And the reason for that is that we gain more insight when the mind is just attending to what's arising in the moment. Or you can be mindful of the senses, all of the senses. Touch, smell, taste, sound, thinking. And just be aware of what's happening in the moment. Because that's actually how which we'll talk about in a minute, you'll get more in touch with impermanence. So the sutta starts out with one abides contemplating the body. So we're essentially picking an object of meditation. Is our meditation of the body? Is it of feelings? Is it of the mind? Or is it of dhammas?
I want to step back to the little girl who dropped the piece of something. Okay, so that's not what I'm concerned with.
I can't remember the story.
Okay. You talked about making a connection.
Yes.
And so if I'm observing what's happening and the piece of food drops to the floor and I pay attention to that, aren't I connecting to that? And isn't that not what I'm supposed to do? And yet you're talking about connecting to the observation. And it may just be me, as I sometimes am concerned with the definition of a word as how it's being used, but it seems to me like if that food drops and I pay attention to it, I'm connecting to that moment, and that's what's disrupting me from following.
You're connecting to a moment that's already happened at that point. Right? If you are focusing on the plate fell, oh my God, the plate fell, the crash, why did they do it? You're connecting with the past already, even if it were instantaneous. If you were connecting with the sound of the crash or the instance of what happened, that is very different than the emotional connection of the reactivity.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah.
So, but I am connecting. And that's what I'm wondering in terms of how does this connection go? So if I connect to the body or the mind or the dhammas, what's this connection mean in terms of a word? So should I...
What it means is that you're with sound.
Yeah.
That's what you're connecting to is sound. Or whatever you want to, whatever your mind has decided that you're going to attend to. If you want to break it down into body, feelings, mind, and dhammas, whatever your object of meditation is. But really, in a situation like that, it's just mindfulness of activity. So, like, just attend to what's happening. Yes, go ahead.
The situation, are you talking about a situation where you're sitting meditating with an intent, or are you talking about just every day?
No, I'm trying to be at the dinner table as the story was set up, and I'm trying to be in the moment of having Thanksgiving dinner with all of my family here, and somebody at the table does something that forces me to connect, as you're saying, and I'm just wondering how that word connection is. Do I connect with the flow of all that's going on, being in the moment?
Yes.
Which I'm getting a yes on. So when I think about that dropped piece of food, that's not connection?
No, you lost it. Yeah, because you're into you're probably in the conceptual realm.
Exactly.
Okay.
You're starting to make a story about the moment that that's the thing about reactivity, right? It throws us into thinking and emotion.
Can I respond again? Because now
Sure.
I know what the situation is, Thanksgiving. My reaction to that is, you then have an opportunity to reflect on how you reacted. If you reacted, how you reacted, because I've been told that I get distracted easily under certain circumstances, and that gave me a lot to think about. And then I started noticing where I can be in a situation where nobody else heard that or saw that, and I'm over here, I got distracted.
Yes.
I allowed myself to get distracted. I reacted, and I got off what I wanted to do, which was whatever that was. So
Well, be careful there, though, because be careful with that, though, because you're putting a story on it there. I allowed myself to get distracted.
Well, okay,
You
I
just got
my main
distracted.
point was that
There is distraction.
There is
how
distraction.
did you react to that? Did you get all like everybody else is having a nice Thanksgiving dinner, and you're like, I can't believe it.
Yeah, well, it makes it's a terminology thing, and that for me is always important. So when I stop and think about that drop piece of food, that's reaction. It's not connection. And so,
Probably not.
yeah.
Probably not, I mean, but see, like right onto that, probably not, but you could also start being mindful of thinking, which is very useful because then you're gaining insight into the sense of self. The sense of self most consistently is going to be thinking and emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Something happens, I become reactive, start thinking about it, and I mean, it's pretty, I'm going to try again. My hope is that you can see how you lose your sense of presence when you get into selfing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
My hope is that you see that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's almost like you're not there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That's been my experience. Maybe it's Halloween. I'm the only person like that.
And yet it seems like if I'm paying attention to that piece of food, that I'm entirely there.
What's that?
It seems like I'm entirely there because I'm looking at that food and I'm all about it.
No,
but,
not necessarily. No. You can be preoccupied and delusional as you look at the food.
oh, absolutely. No, I agree with you.
But you're
but
not
I think,
there. You're not there. You're somewhere else.
Well, I'm with that food.
No, not necessarily. No, probably not.
Mm-hmm.
Probably you're some preoccupied with some aspect of what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Just interrupted.
Mm-hmm.
All you're doing is seeing.
Mm-hmm.
All of this is seeing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a piece of food on the floor. And that's the practice. Really, we go back to the Baha'ya Sutta. I don't know if y'all remember this. So this is great. You know this Sutta? Jane, you know this Sutta? Okay, so the Sutta's like this, a great Sutta, right? Because this person was pressing the Buddha, right, to teach him the teachings, right? And the Buddha was on alms, on collecting food, in the community, right? He the Buddha had a schedule, right? So the guy kept on bothering and said, tell me the teaching. You know the Sutta? Yeah. And the Buddha says, very simple, and I believe this is an Indian tradition too, right? It's an Indian tradition. He says, where there's a seeing, there's just seeing. Where there is a seeing, there's just what's seen.
Mm-hmm.
But what we do is we see the food on the floor and we add everything to it. That's not bad. That is just developing an insight. The insight is unwise view. Because what the view is it's about me, my projection onto her who dropped the food, right? My projection is still a sense of me, right? And I'm looking at it as probably a durable experience, right? That's not subject to change.
Mm-hmm.
When I get dialed into that. So the practice with the senses are great because the senses activate a lot of sense of self. If you notice that, they activate a lot of selfing. Just, hey, I wanted to suggest to you, like this week coming up, be mindful of seeing. Practice mindfulness of seeing. And there will be when you just see, you see all the time. We see all the time. Right, and when
that's just being right now in the now, right? Present.
Not
present.
necessarily.
No.
No. Everybody in here has seen something and got into delusion. I would bet.
So
I bet you $20.
as an example,
I don't know how you're going to prove it, but
well, going back to our drop plate example, right? Let's pretend you weren't in the room when it happened, and you hear the crash, and you walk around the corner, and you see that plate on the floor. You're seeing it, but I promise, what is happening in most people's mind is you're stepping through some type of scenario. You're building a story around it. You're making a story. And so you're not just seeing, right? You're not seeing that there is...
And that's why this is training. That's why this is training. We have to train ourselves to just keep on being mindful. And then the training is when we become reactive, right? Noticing that conditioning. It's not, again, that the reactivity is bad. It's the truth. I mean, you look at, so the Buddha said, I mean, if you look at the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 4 noble truths, it's all about suffering. Every bit is about suffering. Every bit of it is about suffering. So we are getting a close-up view of what that is. So we're not here to judge suffering. Everybody here suffers. We suffer in different ways, right? And it's most consistently because reactivity. It is reactivity. I see something, I smell something, I touch something, I taste something, I hear something, I think something, and then the mind just goes, whoop, just like David says, whoop, does something, and then we get into delusion. If you can track that process, like I did in the guided meditation, if you got distracted, see if you can notice what led to the distraction. That's contemplation. not necessarily a meditation, but it's still very useful because you're gaining insight into how your reactivity works.
Are you supposed to, when you see something, stop it there and just look and not put a story with it? Is that your goal?
Well, yes and no. You see, like the problem with that though is that then we start to put effort into not thinking. You know, it's more like this is just observing what is, right? And then when we become distracted, we become reactive, right? You know, bringing ourselves back. The instructions are not that difficult.
Are you saying notice what you're seeing?
Right, Roxy? They're not. We're making it more difficult. Just observe what's happening. When you get distracted into delusion, come back. But if you can develop insight into how the mind becomes reactive, that is very useful.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Lewis.
Yeah.
Are you saying if the Buddha saw something, he wouldn't say something?
Well, but here's the difference.
I just wanted to say something funny.
Are you trying to be funny?
That was so funny.
I really appreciate you adding that granularity to the sutta,
Yeah.
because
a
I
word?
did let it kind of just go right past.
Yeah, it's easy to do, and we're going to cover more of it. So yeah, it is. This part of the sutta is where it's at, because it doesn't really matter if you're practicing body or feelings or mind or dhammas. These are the instructions. Bear attention and continuous mindfulness. Bear attention means, can I be with what it is right now as it is? The mind is a machine of knowing. The mind's function is to know. I know this. I know this. I know this. I know this. I know her. The problem is that perception without mindfulness, it's just delusion. We have to be aware of what we're witnessing. That's where mindfulness steps in. It's called metacognition, or being aware. That's the process. So what bear attention means is, I know Gail. Okay, I'm not going to jump any conclusions about Gail. Don't say anything funny yet. I'm not going to jump in, but I know her. I know her as a person, but I'm aware of knowing her as a person. It's different, because if I just know her as Gail, then I've got all this kind of infected perception from my history with Gail. But if I step back and I have metacognitive awareness of Gail, then she's different. She's not two-dimensional, she's three-dimensional. It's tremendously exciting.
And that's why we do all this.
It's tremendously
It can
exciting.
be fun just to notice when you're in anicca or dukkha or anatta. If you're getting attached to something, you go, oh, well, I've done this. I know this one. That's where the fun comes in. That's when it gets fun, and it's not like, oh, I'm doing something wrong again. It's like, oh, I just went into selfing again. Oh, it's Dharma goofiness.
But you do realize though, see, it's not that the reactivity is bad. That would be adding something extra to the reactivity, right? We don't want to do that. So that's what happens in meditation communities is, oh my God, suffering, I gotta quit suffering. It's not that. It's about gaining insight into suffering. It's about understanding suffering.
Yeah. Do you get angry when you sneeze? Does anybody here get angry when they sneeze?
No.
No, I find it a very pleasant sensation.
Love it. I do
You?
No. Andy has to
Sounds
throw
like
this
you
curveball.
do.
I'm claiming the sneezing.
The whole point is that you can't necessarily control. Maybe we have somebody in here who can control when they sneeze. I don't know, but you can't control when you sneeze, right? You don't judge that you're sneezing. You get to a point where you don't judge the thought. You don't judge the entire process, right? Your thoughts are no different than a sneeze. Long term.
Yeah, it's very nice. The traditional thing is the mosquito lands on your shoulder. Y'all heard this, right? You know this one? Yeah, teachers teach this. Peter teaches it. You're meditating. You know, it's a humid area, right? Summertime. Mosquito lands on your shoulder, right, and starts to dig in, right? And so then at first, when you first learn how to meditate, it's like, oh my God, I can't sit here. I'm gonna kill this. It's gonna kill me, right? All this narrative, right? And then after a while, it's just like, oh, sensation. That's the training. It's a training, just like the sneeze. It's the training. The training is learning how to observe what's here, pleasant or unpleasant. Sometimes the pleasant is a problem because the pleasant, we want to stay in it. I hope this never ends. I don't want this sunset to ever stop, right? So we get attached to that. We cling to that, right? We cling to the unpleasant. We cling to the pleasant, and that's what happens with the senses. The problem with the senses is they activate the feeling tone, right? Y'all know this, right? And that conditions everything else. Which, by the way, again, bear attention and continuous mindfulness. We gain insight into how this conditioning process works. I don't like this at all, but when people say it is what it is, that's relevant. I mean, as long as you're mindful, instead of just saying it is what it is, but I kind of like, I know what Gail is. I know her. I know all about her, right? Deep inside my psyche, because we do two-dimensional stuff. Might as well stand a placard up.
And you're not in present.
We're not in the present.
Like Gail could be anything right now.
Absolutely.
Way more than I could ever imagine if I'm just present with her.
No, that's right.
And that's exciting.
It's very exciting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I comment on the mosquito
Yeah, sure.
situation?
Go ahead.
One of the things I think in the past, let's just say 6 months, I've really noticed I've improved my skill at, I end up with a preposition, is that if I have something like a distracting bug or tickle or something, and I notice it, and then I know what I'm really noticing is my reaction to it, because it's not the thing, it's how I react, and that's the fun thing to observe is I used to have this tickles and things would come up to distract me, and I'll feel it now, and then I notice, oh, I just got tense. I got tense, but if I pay attention to the tension, the other thing goes away. It's really not that thing. It's this.
That's an insight. So that's an insight.
But the more I practice it, the more I've gotten to see the cover story there instead of the tickle.
So what insight is that? I mentioned 2 insights earlier. What insight is that one? That's insight.
Body or sensation?
Yeah, right. It's name form. It's nama rupa. That's the first insight. It's like the rupa is unpleasant sensation on the body. The mind makes some formulation about it, some reactivity about it. Yeah, that's an insight you're having. I'm glad you're having that insight. Everybody has that insight already, right? But also, the thing we're practicing with meditation is to go on more subtle levels. How the mind reacts, emotionally and viscerally to very subtle sensory information, or in thinking, can come up from the unconscious, right? You have a thought out of the unconscious, right? Because it's like a trap door in your mind body, right? Thought comes up, and a half hour later you're still thinking about this person. You want revenge on this person, right? It's insanity, right? Right? That happened 20 years ago, right? And we do that. Or 20 years ago this person is wonderful, and 20 years ago you think they're wonderful. They could be the devil, right? But now they're a wonderful person, right? That's what we do. So with this, the continuity of mindfulness is something we work for, right? I mean, well, it's actually effortless. After a while, the more we practice, it gets to be this way. It's not anything that we necessarily have to put effort in. We just have to wake up, because it's all there. It's already there. All these awakening factors are all there already. We just got to build on them, okay? So the more that we practice mindfulness and keep bringing ourselves back to this, and there's strategies we could talk about later about developing continuity of mindfulness. In fact, we did that once in here. We did talk about strategies for developing continuity of mindfulness. This is actually concentration. This turns out to be concentration, because we're keeping ourselves in the now, like somebody said in the class, okay? And we are giving attention to various aspects of the mind-body, okay? And we're also practicing awareness, awareness of whatever we're attending to, maybe even some peripheral awareness. The more that we can keep our mindfulness going, it leads to this other insight. The other insight is the arising and passing. Very important, arising and passing. Because when we come into meditation classes, it seems like it's this permanent experience happening. It's not. It's everything's in flux experience. So our job is to our task is to be able to observe impermanence on a more subtle level, and how come we want to do that? Well, we want to do that because we are cleaning the mind up of selfishness and self-centeredness and wrongdoing and all the taints in the mind. And then when we clean the mind up, everybody in here, we all are loving. We all have love and compassion and generosity and gratitude. All these qualities are available. And the start of the path is such that we can practice those now, but as we move along, these qualities, these helpful qualities of the mind, are not near as infected by this self, this sense of self. It's more authentic sense of connection that we have. So Ben, would you read this next one? So this is Helen Keller, and this is about bare attention.
Helen Keller was deaf, dumb, and blind. So she had tactile contact with the world, but she couldn't see and she couldn't hear. So that's a pretty big handicap. So she had a teacher when she was a child who was trying to teach her in spite of that. She writes someone, parenthetically here, it was her teacher, but she didn't know that. Someone was drawing water from a faucet, I guess, and my teacher placed my hand under the spout. As the cool stream gushed over my hand, she spelled into the other hand the word water, first slowly, then rapidly. I stood still, my whole attention fixed upon the motion of her fingers. Suddenly, I felt a misty consciousness as something forgotten and somehow the mystery of mind which was revealed to me. I knew then that water, W-A-T-E-R, meant the wonderful cool something that was flowing over my hand. That living word awakened my soul, gave it light, hope, and set it free.
So this is bare attention. So this being with what is, right, is tremendously exciting for us. This world, when we get away from this delusional mind and this greed, hatred, and delusion, and life becomes rich and rich and rich and rich.
And that's a great story to remember.
It is a great
Wow.
story. Oh yeah, and the resources too. I think you did the ones for effort, right? Okay, so I didn't give you. The resources aren't on the web yet, but basically the same resources. But there's a Noble Eightfold Path series on audio Dharma, taught by a teacher I like out west. Her name's Andrea Fella. She teaches out west, and she also teaches across the world. Okay, but I like her. So there's also, if you go on audio Dharma, and you do the search for wise mindfulness, I think it's bare attention and continuous mindfulness, or wise mindfulness. It's not too far back, like 2021. She does a talk, and then of course the other things that I've listed for resources too. That's the main thing I use for this talk. Andrea Fella. Okay. Any other comments about the story that Ben read, or anything else tonight? Yes, ma'am.
I like to imagine that the Dharma is and the Eightfold Path is like the Buddha riding water in our hands.
Yeah. Wow.
That's our teacher.
And if we could minimize the distractions and the reactions, then we could have more of that experience, because I guess it's there all the time. We just
Oh yeah, that's the beautiful thing about all of this, is realizing how much we just don't pay any attention to. I mean, yeah, that's really one of the beautiful parts of this entire practice to me, is sitting down and realizing you don't pay attention to the weight in your legs. You don't pay attention to the breeze that's crossing your skin as something flows through. There's so much beauty that we take for granted. That's there always, constantly. Sorry, I'll gush for a while, but yes, that's a huge part of this to me.
Well, you just keep on gushing. Yes, ma'am.
The other thing was, when he read that, the word that kept coming to me is connection. Just like she then all of a sudden she knew there was this whole connection. She wasn't alone in her space, and so there must be some connection or oneness must come as you clear up the
Yes.
fog of
Yes.
distraction.
That's great.
That
Now, this is wise view. She was in wise view, right? So wise view, right? Interdependence and this view of reality, characteristics of reality, characteristics of existence, impermanence, selflessness, and reactivity. This is wise view. So when we start to practice, right, we start with the wisdom part, intention, and effort is informed by intention. Intention to be aware, right, basically, right, and then effort is the effort to be aware and be with what is, observe what is, right. So intention is wisdom, okay, and also intention is also informed by wise view. Sense of connection, sense of three characteristics of existence. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
good stuff.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Oh, another resource too is I use Rodney Smith's book, Stepping Out of Self-Deception, quite a bit. Didn't use it much tonight, but I use it quite a bit.
Was there something that I read that talked about they were using breath for mindfulness, and it's like notice when you start to breathe the duration of the breath, and then it went into something about and then just quiet the breath. And I remember way back when we talked about can you notice when the breath starts and can you notice when the breath ends, and that's always stuck with me. It's always something that I've played with. And it wasn't until I read that quieting the breath that I went, oh. And then I became the observer of the breath, which is concentration versus insight, because I wasn't focusing on I am breathing. I was just focusing on breath, and I finally got that connection. Thank you for that conversation about.
Yeah, it might be really useful for our group to start exploring some shamatha practices, some calming practices. That sounds to me like a calming practice. Yeah. Because the calming, like I was saying in the guided meditation, the fixed attention that we're doing, most of us are doing fixed attention, right? We're focusing on a place, right? That's called fixed attention or fixed object attention. Or if you're concentrated, it's called fixed object concentration, right? And that's calming practice, really. When it comes down to it, it's calming practice, right? But really, to really observe impermanence, which we're here to do, I mean, impermanence is the path. I mean, besides connection, right? Besides wise view, right? Is to be able to observe what's happening in the mind moment to moment. What's happening in the mind moment to moment. What's happening in the mind moment to moment. Sometimes it's just good to just watch your mind. Just watch things arising in the mind. No, just do it sometime. Just create some space with it. Just sit down and meditate 15 minutes, 5 minutes, and just observe what's happening in the mind, right? And give it space. And give it space. And keep your mindfulness. Just say, I'm going to be mindful of what's happening in the mind. Right? And then you'll get distracted, right? Right? You'll get distracted. That's okay, right? That's part of the path, right? You're understanding suffering, right? You're distracted, right? And come back to observing what's happening in the mind, right? It could be a lot of fun, actually. You get crash course on impermanence. All right, everybody be safe. You're quite welcome.
Thanks, Andy.